It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and please be sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, we've got a ton of great herd mentality items to dig into today. First of all, real quick, I will acknowledge that the Buffalo Bills signed wide receiver Trent Sherfield, and he's a fascinating player, but I want to talk about him tomorrow. So I'm going to do the film study. I'll present him. My plan is to have a conversation with Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins and share that with you, and then have a big picture conversation on the status of the Buffalo Bills wide receiver core with the addition of Trent Sherfield. So you have that to look forward to tomorrow. Today, herd mentality. The first one is a question I am getting from a ton of people, and it's about compensatory picks and the Bills' chances of getting one from Tremaine Edmunds or from the loss of Tremaine Edmunds. So let's have a refresher on how you earn a compensatory pick in the NFL. You earn a compensatory pick in the NFL by having a net loss in unrestricted free agents to other teams than you signed. You earn a compensatory pick by having a net loss in unrestricted free agents signed to other teams than you signed yourself. Now, there is a caveat. The contracts have to be relatively notable. In fact, the threshold is the players you sign for them to qualify and the players you lose for them to qualify. They have to sign deals that pay them in the top 35% of players in the league, which is around $2.7 million right now. So, for example, Kyle Allen doesn't qualify as a player the Bills added because his salary is not in the top 35%. So step one is that you have to have that net loss in players that you lose that were unrestricted free agents versus the players that you sign that are unrestricted free agents, as long as their salaries are going to be higher than or within the top 35% of the NFL. So as of right now, the Bills have added two players that qualify in Deontay Hardy and Connor McGovern, and they lost two players that qualify in Tremaine Edmunds and Case Keenum. So the answer right now is no, especially because we don't know what Trent Sherfield's salary is going to be. If he's going to be in the top 35%, then that puts the Bills at +1 in compensatory picks. So if you wind up having a net loss in unrestricted free agents in versus out, of course, again, the qualifier top 35% of salaries, then you will be eligible. And from there, the size of contracts come into play if you have that net loss. And so the Bills losing Tremaine Edmunds for the deal that he signed with the Bears is a very good piece in getting a compensatory pick, but it starts with having a net loss. And right now the Bills are even. And then depending on Trent Sherfield's contract, they could be +1. And so they have to be on the other side. It can't be even and has to be a net loss to get or become eligible for compensatory picks. Now, let me say this about compensatory picks, and I love draft picks as much as anybody in the world, probably more than most people, but I don't obsess over compensatory picks. And the reason why is because I think it's foolish to obsess over compensatory picks. It's a very limiting way to look at things because, again, it's the net loss of unrestricted free agents in versus out. And so you can live in this world where you only focus on players that were cut, or you wait until later in the offseason where it doesn't matter when a player was signed. You know, there's a certain point where, I don't know if it's in June or something like that, where players added no longer count for or against your compensatory pick equation. Why would you narrow your player pool to obsess over adding a 4th or a 5th or a 6th round pick? Just try to sign as many good players as you can, build a deep and talented roster, and go from there. And what Brandon Beane has done a great job of throughout his career with the Buffalo Bills is not obsessing over this and developing a surplus of talent, which he can then trade for draft picks. Brandon Beane's compensatory picks are the ones that he gets when he trades away a player that he was going to cut, like a Russell Bodine or a Marshall Newhouse or a Zay Jones or whatever player, A.J. McCarron. Players that he's traded because he had a surplus of talent at a position. That's the right way to do it. You don't want to limit your player pool. So I don't obsess over comp picks. Brandon Beane doesn't obsess over comp picks. Some teams do, and I think it's foolish because it limits the players that you're really looking at to build the best possible roster. The next one comes from Scarecrow Boat, who says, would you trade our first-round pick for Jerry Jeudy? That's the reported asking price for him. Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver, Denver Broncos. He's played 3 seasons, was a first-round pick for them out of Alabama. Bright young player in just about every imaginable way. He fits the profile of the skill set that I would be looking for in the Bills' number 2 wide receiver. So I love the player, the fit, all of that. I really do. Here's what I will say. I wouldn't make this trade until draft day. I'd want to know who's on the board for me. So I'd like to know, all right, what am I trading away from? Because I think you can play the value game and still get a young wide receiver that's meaningful, but then also help yourself with that first-round pick in another way. And that intrigues me. I want to have that low-cost player for longer. Jerry Jeudy, next year is his 4th season, which is a really low cap hit, but then you have the 5th-year option that you'd have to make a choice on, and that's $13 million. And then he gets real expensive, right? Assuming he's on the trajectory that you think he's going to be on. He's 23 years old, really talented player, and hasn't had stable quarterback play yet, really, to this point in Denver. I think his best football is ahead of him. He intrigues me a lot. And depending on who would be on the board at pick 27, I might be willing to say, you know what? Yeah, I'll send this to the Denver Broncos. We'll take Jerry Jeudy. A lot like we saw last year in the draft where the Eagles, when they were on the clock, they traded for A.J. Brown, gave up their first-round pick. The Cardinals traded their first-round pick for Marquise Hollywood Brown. I would want to attack it from that lens more than right now. Hey, here's pick 27 for Jerry Jeudy. But I think generally I would be on board for parting with that for that player. But I'm not sprinting to do it. I'd want to know who's on the board. I want to know what I'm actually trading away from. Michael says, the conversation of Jordan Poyer coming back and playing with Micah Hyde again, it made me think past their careers into the wall. Do you think in a couple of decades when their names come up, a special case could be made for them to go up in the rafters as a tandem like they are on the field? Well, I would say there's no doubt about it that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer are players that I think should be in the Buffalo Bills Ring of Honor in due time. And I love your idea. I love your idea of putting them kind of right there next to each other. And it should be the same day, same ceremony, right? You do it together. That's a special group. And I think more than anything, that group was part of the turnaround of this organization. They were signed in that offseason before the 2017 year. I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are at the core of the Buffalo Bills turning it around as an organization. And so any reverence that could be paid to them for what they've done, I'm for it. And it's been as fun of a tandem in my lifetime rooting for the Buffalo Bills, right? I've said this, where I think it's just a really special situation. Like I said a few days ago, you think about pillars of fandom for me: Kyle Williams, Fred Jackson, Eric Moulds, Josh Allen, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Like it's all in the same bucket for me. And so, yes, I'm on board with celebrating them forever and their role in turning around this organization. Well, folks, we got a bunch more to get to here in just a moment. But first, I do need to tell you about FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained, and there's no better sportsbook to place your bets than FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So do not miss this chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. The next one today comes from Bub, who says, does the Bills' offensive scheme with no hard routes or landmarks limit the pool of receivers they can sign in free agency or in the draft? Do you think it's a skill any good wide receiver can learn, or they need reps? Or is it similar to a linebacker having instincts? It's a fair question here. The first thing that I want to clarify is that while the Bills do have a lot of option routes within their offense, and it relies on the wide receivers to adjust on the fly and process coverage rotations and adjust their routes accordingly, like that's definitely a thing. There are more locked in routes. You know, Josh will get to the line of scrimmage and he will lock in routes. Okay, the dig is locked. The post is locked. So there is no sight adjustment necessary. And I think more times than not, that's the case. So let's just have a clarification there. Now, with that said, it is a thing. Sight adjustments and then altering your routes accordingly is a thing. And I think that does somewhat limit the wide receivers that you would want to go after, because you'd want to have those that have good processing skills, that understands coverage rotations, timing, and where to be. So it's not just the physical ability. There's a mental makeup required. There's a football intelligence that you're going to want to lean into. And so that's going to make it tougher for some receivers to come in and get playing time and contribute. And I'm sure that's something the Bills are keenly aware of as they consider the wide receivers that they're going to bring in. Can it be taught? I think is at the root of your question. I think you can improve upon it, right? You can learn more and apply that through reps. I think it's something that you can gain an increased understanding of, but based on your experiences as a wide receiver, you're going to be at different levels of understanding, and that's really going to speak to that curve between your ability to come in and really gain playing time and contribute. So there is something to it for sure. But that's not unique to the Bills. I mean, it's pro football. Option routes, sight adjustments, all of that's part of the deal. So it's not like there's going to be places that a receiver could go that would not rely on that. That's always going to be something that's important. Maybe some teams more than others, but it's part of being a pro wide receiver. Tom says, I just listened to the Connor McGovern film review pod, and I was curious about how linemen improve on weaknesses. Specifically, do you think Aaron Cromer can get Connor's run blocking game up to par, or is this just something that's a bridge too far for him? Is it more of a physical limitation issue, or is it something that just needs to be coached up? Obviously, the Cowboys tried, but failed to get him there. Strength training and positioning can be coached. I honestly don't know enough about how the linemen train to have an educated opinion. Really good question, Tom. Can Connor McGovern become a more effective run blocker? The answer to that is yes. And a big reason why is just the style of scheme and how different the Bills' run scheme is compared to the Cowboys' run scheme. It's going to allow him to play more to his strengths. Now, I think at the core of your question is, can Connor McGovern get stronger and create more displacement in a run game? Which you can, right? You can get stronger. You can get stronger and then learn how to apply that on the field to have more functional strength. But a hallmark of Aaron Kromer and run blocking, and I've spent a fair amount of time with Aaron Kromer over the last year and him breaking down different philosophies that he has. He's not looking for maulers. He doesn't necessarily want the guy that just looks to flat back everybody and drive them out of the stadium. He wants guys that are grounded, that understand how to use the ground for leverage and leverage their hips and play with good hand leverage and stay in control. He's not interested in guys that create momentum and rely on momentum to create that initial jolt and then run your feet and really move bodies out of the way. He'd much rather you stay balanced and engaged and create gaps than he'd want to live with the variance of relying on that initial jolt and momentum to really create movement. If you rely on momentum, you are not an offensive lineman that Aaron Kromer is going to want. He wants guys that are grounded and understand how to stay grounded and use that for leverage. And so in so many ways, Conor McGovern makes a lot of sense for Aaron Kromer. But I don't think that Aaron Kromer is going to turn Connor McGovern into a road grading offensive lineman. That won't be the case. Can he turn him into a more effective run blocker through scheme and through obviously getting stronger and applying that in different ways to be a more effective run blocker? Absolutely. So hopefully that was a helpful answer there. But it's not just a matter of get stronger, you're a better run blocker. It's how you're asked to run block and then embracing Aaron Kromer's philosophies and techniques for that to happen. And Connor McGovern has the type of skill set that really works for what has worked for Aaron Kromer throughout his very successful career coaching offensive linemen in the NFL. Adam says, can you shed some light on why Brandon Beane has not done anything at middle linebacker? Guys like Drew Tranquill and Al Shahir shine for cheap. How does Dotson and Bernard compare to those players? I know Bernard was drafted, but it seems bringing in a vet for competition would be the smart thing to do. Well, I think Brandon Beane gave us his answer to this at the end of last week, where when he was asked about replacing Tremaine Edmunds, his response was, well, sometimes the answer is on the roster, and mentioned Tyrel Dotson and mentioned Terrell Bernard and even mentioned Balen Spector. Now, I'm with you. I'd love for the Bills to have brought in a Drew Tranquill. You know, he signed for like a pretty fair 1 year, like $5 million deal. Now, Drew Tranquill's had a lot of injury issues, but I think he could have been a serviceable Mike linebacker for this team. I think having a veteran in the mix there at its core is something that the Bills have always preferred, but I don't know if they view a guy like Tyler Medikevich and Tyrel Dotson as veterans that they have in that room. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. You know, it could be another young player, but the market for veteran Mike linebackers is drying up, or it has really dried up pretty quickly. And so we'll see how this all comes together. In some ways, it's against the Bills' tendencies, but at least from a messaging perspective, they're leaning into, it feels like, Dotson versus Bernard versus Spector to be the player next to Matt Milano. Mike says, what are your thoughts on Syracuse running back Sean Tucker? Does anything change with his reported vertical 40 and bench? Is a third round still too high? So let's talk about Sean Tucker, running back from Syracuse. Did a workout. His reported numbers were 41.5-inch vertical jump, 4.33 40-yard dash, 28 bench press reps. If you've watched Sean Tucker play, those numbers don't surprise you. He's very, very, very athletic. That's noticeable. Track guy. Dino Babers, the head coach there at Syracuse, raves about him. Had a conversation with Dino Babers last summer when he was in town for ACC Media Day, and we talked about Sean Tucker and raved about the worker that he is, and really felt like he was going to have an amazing season this past year, and he really didn't. I think Sean Tucker, after setting the Syracuse school record in 2021, really didn't build on that last year. Had a single season record, 1,496 yards in 2021. Let me read some notes from my scouting report on Sean Tucker, which will take you on a journey where you're going to hear about a lot of exciting strengths, and then you're going to hear about a lot of concerning issues. And then that will probably give you the information necessary to get a gauge on how I feel about him as a Bills fit. This is what I wrote. Tucker is a quick accelerator with breakaway speed, which enables him to win off tackle and present a home run threat to defenses. Tucker's footwork is quick and nimble. It's quite impressive how light he is on his feet. He's fully capable of remaining balanced while stringing together dynamic moves. Tucker does a great job of staying square and is a competitive runner. I appreciate how he works off his blocks and his feet never stop moving through contact. Tucker has been a reliable ball carrier for Syracuse that has claimed a significant workload and delivered high-end production while demonstrating excellent ball security. When it comes to concerns, Tucker has a lot to prove on passing downs. As a blocker, Tucker struggled in 2021 with processing pressure and blocking technique, and in 2022, his opportunities to help in pass protection diminished significantly. With that said, his receiving production did increase in 2022, but so did his inconsistency with securely catching the football. While there are plenty of moments of strong catches outside his frame, those moments are marred with body catches and drops. In 2022, Tucker didn't hit holes with the same level of conviction that we saw in 2021, which contributed to only modest success surviving contact and winning in short yardage. There's so much to love about the big play potential of Tucker, but his snap-to-snap consistency as a ball carrier and passing down contributor clouds his projection. Tucker has the makeup of an impact weapon in the NFL, but development is needed for him to have a lead role. So you love the physical profile, explosiveness, home run ability, but short yardage, hitting holes with convictions, pass pro, those are major concerns with Sean Tucker. And so that's what really kind of moves me off of him as a potential Bills target. So we'll see what happens with Tucker at the next level. I feel like his makeup is really strong, and talent and habits is a really nice combination. But there needs to be significant growth for him to add value on passing downs, especially in pass protection. Struggled a lot in 2021, and then they almost didn't let him do it in 2022. And then there's is this a guy that really is going to survive a lot of contact and hit holes with convictions and be an asset in short yardage? I have my doubts about that. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now it's time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. You know I'm going to be voting for the Brownie Batter Puffs. And if you have a favorite bar or puff, support your bar or puff and head on over to BuiltMarchMadness.com. And when you vote for your favorite, you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one lucky Locked On fan will get a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. And folks, you got to try Built Bar. They're the best protein bars ever. They're delicious. They're amazing. So many great flavors. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. I love these things. I honestly eat about 2 a day. They're so good, and they're full of protein. So I love that. So run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. All right, we got a few more to get to here today. The next one comes from Bills WZA, who says, obviously you can't predict the future, but do you have any sense of what fans should expect in terms of signings between now and the draft? Are you still expecting some signings to take place, or should we temper our hopes for now? Well, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. So what I did is I went back to 2020, the last offseason, the year before that. And I looked at the signings that came after the first wave of free agency until the draft. And here's what happened. And there's some notable stuff here. So last year the second wave in to the draft, the Bills signed Jamison Crowder, Tywan Jones, Bobby Hart, and David Quessenberry, all players that were rostered and made the team. So you can see some significant things happen along the way there. Then last year, when I say last year, I mean the year before that, kind of leading into the 2021 season. In that stretch, the Bills re-signed Isaiah McKenzie, Signed F.A. Obata, Matt Breida, Brandon Powell, Bobby Hart, Markel Lee, Tyrell Adams, Jamil Douglas, and Forrest Lamp. So I would expect some players to be added. Probably not any big fish, obviously, but role players, depth players, kind of filling in the blanks to make sure that Brandon Beane doesn't have to marry himself to specific positions with his early round picks. I think you'll see that happen. And there's plenty of spots where that would make sense, whether it's tight end, running back, offensive tackle, defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker. All of that's in play to me in the next few weeks before the draft. The next one comes from Tristan, who says, do you think it's possible the Bills won't meaningfully address middle linebacker because they're comfortable using 6 defensive backs at once? That would seem drastic to me, but the Bills are ahead of the rest of the NFL on switching to base nickel, and their secondary depth makes it intriguing. I would say this is pretty unlikely. I know there's some champions out there for positionless players and all that, and I think situationally that makes sense. But if you're going to play 6 defensive backs, all you're doing is inviting teams to run the ball all over you. And so situationally, sure, but as your base, as your primary personnel grouping, I don't see this. In fact, I think you're seeing teams trending more towards offensively wanting to run more 12 personnel, wanting to run more condensed sets, heavier packages, because the NFL is presenting them with base nickel defenses. And they're saying, okay, you want to put small people on the field now? We'll put big people on the field. So I think there's continuous cat and mouse game that is kind of trending in the opposite of this idea. I know the Patriots will run some 6 DB stuff, and the Bills killed them whenever they did that. So I think situationally, yes. As a base foundation of the defense, no, I still think it'd be more 4-2-5. Next one today comes from Toby, who says, non-Bills question, but I was wondering whether you have any desire to work for an NFL team as a scout, or if you prefer doing what you currently do. I will never say never on that, but I really like what I do. I love doing this podcast. I love doing the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. I love writing books. This is really fun. I work from home. My wife and daughter are in the living room right now watching TV. I don't really want to trade that in for life on the road as an NFL scout. I've had opportunities. I've had different people offer to put me in front of different people and help me along the way. But I like what I'm doing. And there's a lot of instability in the NFL. And so as somebody who prefers stability, that loves flexibility, that enjoys the family dynamics that currently exist, I like this. And things turn over so quick in the NFL, and it's this rat race. It's competitive. I don't know. It doesn't really intrigue me. The intrigue would be being able to say that you work for an NFL team. That's it. But everything else about it, I don't know. It doesn't really align with the things that are most important to me. And I still get to be fully involved with football, but I don't have to deal with the lifestyle of working in the NFL, which is pretty intense, pretty labor intensive, a lot of hours. I'll stick with this. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. Tomorrow, Trent Sherfield, I'm going to break him down. We'll have Kyle on. We're going to talk about the Bills wide receiver core in general. So come on back for that. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Go Bills. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.